Hi, I'm glad that you guys are enjoying the chapter reviews. I had some people request for PowerPoints, and I don't mind making them. In fact, I love making PowerPoints. So let's go ahead and jump into Chapter 8, Human Relations. Decision making. First thing you have to know about decision making is what is a decision? Simply put, it is making choices among alternative courses of action or inaction. Okay, so even not doing something can be a decision. You're making a decision not to do something. Communication and emotional intelligence are absolutely vital for making good decisions. You have to be able to communicate what it is you want, what it is to other people. You have to be able to tell them, here's why I'm making this decision. Also, emotional intelligence. This is not only being able to be aware of yourself, that's self-awareness, being able to know what your needs are, what your motives are, but also the needs, desires, and motives of others. Having that emotional intelligence to be able to kind of feel what's going on, feel the room. For example, if you were wanting to make a decision about cutting hours short because you have to cut back hours. And instead of just saying, okay, well, we're cutting this person, and just doing it. Instead, having that open communication to say, hey, crew of 8 people, we have to cut back hours. There's some ways that we can do it. We can cut, 2 hours from each person, or we can cut, one person can take 1 day off, alternate days off if you guys would like to do that. And you can kind of have that communication and also the emotional intelligence to kind of gauge how people are feeling about it. And really in making decisions and making choices for your company and for yourself and for others, especially if you're in a leadership position, having that communication and emotional intelligence is very important. So types of decisions. Well, there's 2 major types of decisions, and there's lots of types of decisions, but 2 major types of decisions are program decisions and non-program decisions. Program decisions are decisions that are made prescriptively. We already know what is going to happen if this happens. So a program decision is maybe a 10-year plan. This is the plan we're going to follow. This is how things are going to go. For example, I made a decision I would be doing chapter reviews for my live sessions. Well, someone had sent me an email and said, I really would like to have PowerPoints. I was in another class and they happened to be in my 201 class, Psych 201 as well. And they took this class just because they wanted to. So she said, I really liked having, the PowerPoints in the other class. Do you think you could do that for this class? And I was like, yeah, sure. So this was a non-program decision to go ahead and make these PowerPoints because the student may have needed them. So program decisions are things that, I already had a plan. I kind of already knew what I was doing. It was a decision that I had made. I knew how I was going to do things, but when the person said I'd really like to have PowerPoints, I was like, I could do that. So that was a non-program decision to go ahead and make those PowerPoints to be able to satisfy the needs of hopefully more than just one student, but hopefully a lot of you will enjoy the PowerPoints. Another thing is like a program decision may be how to respond to customers, but then a non-program decision, like for example, 2020 COVID-19, we obviously businesses have had to make a lot of non-program decisions. We did not program or plan for this. So how is it we need to respond? Some places did have some program decisions in place. If a pandemic happens, this is what we'll do. I think that, Piedmont Tech was very well prepared. I think that Self Regional was some of the hospitals were very well prepared. I do think, however, there are a lot of smaller businesses and a lot of other businesses that they really didn't have a pandemic plan. So program decisions versus non-program decisions. Program decisions being scheduled, what the decision is going to be, whereas non-programmed are events or things that come up. And I believe your textbook, by the way, mentions with non-program decisions, your textbook discusses McDonald's and having to change their menu items because of complaints of them being very unhealthy. And that was a non-program decision. All right. So different types of decisions continued. You have 3 basic types of, or 3 continued types of decision making. You have strategic, tactical, and operational. Strategic decisions are major choices of actions and influence the whole or major part of the business enterprise. They contribute directly to the achievement of common goals in the enterprise, and they have long-term implications on the business enterprise. So they have long-term implications. They may involve things like major departures from practices and procedures being followed earlier. Generally, strategic decisions is an unstructured and thus a manager who has to apply his business judgment, evaluation, and intuition into definition of the problem. These decisions are based on practical knowledge of the environmental factors, which are uncertain and dynamic. Such decisions are taken kind of in the higher levels of management. Next is tactical decisions. These decisions relate to implementation of strategic decisions. So they are directed towards the development of divisional plans, structuring workflows, establishing distribution channels, acquisition of resources such as individuals to work, materials, and money. These decisions are taken kind of in more of a middle management level. So you may have the strategic decision is that we are going to have everyone to clock in and clock out on a new computer system. So that decision is made by the company. It's a strategic decision. It's going to save us money. It'll save us time. So we're going to do it this way. And so the implementation is then the divisional plan, structuring that workflow. How are people going to clock in? How are we going to, what's going to be the acceptable, if they're 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 5 minutes early, how is that going to work? So that's kind of the, getting people to adhere to the strategic decision is also making the tactical decisions of how am I going to get individuals to follow these rules. Then operational decisions. This is decisions relate to day-to-day operations of the enterprise. They have short-term horizon and they are taken repeatedly. These decisions are based on facts regarding events and do not require much business judgment. Operational decisions are taken at a lower levels of management as the information is needed for helping the manager to take rational, well-informed decisions. Information systems need to focus on the procedure of managerial decision making. So operational decisions are going to be kind of the day-to-day. So let's say that the strategic plan is that we are going to implement a computerized clock-in system. The tactical decisions are, how are we going to implement this? How are individuals going to clock in? What are the parameters for late, not late? How are people going to learn how to utilize this new system? And then the operational decisions are, hey, Meredith, did you finish the training for the new check-in system? So that's kind of the operational decision, just making sure people are doing what they are supposed to be doing and things are running smoothly that have been implemented. All right. So next is making rational decisions. Rational decision-making model describes a series of steps that the decision makers should consider if their goal is to maximize the quality of their outcome. So rational decision-making is where you want to create a goal. What's the goal? Then you want to look and say, well, what are my important factors? Okay, this is the decision criteria. I'm going to list out 10 things that are important within this decision. And then I'm going to decide what actually is important. So let's say you're going to look into buying a car. Your goal is to get a car. Important factors, you need to have good, economic value. It needs to have good gas mileage. It needs to be able to load equipment into it. It needs to have a removable bed, maybe. It needs to look sharp. You have all these factors that you believe are important. Well, next is you look at it and you go, now I got to decide what's really important. Is it really that important that the vehicle look sharp? I'm using it for work utility. I know I want to look cool when I'm out there, but this one's that's really not the most important factor. So you can kind of knock that one out. Even looking into a house, for example, making a rational decision. It would be irrational for me to ever buy another house that doesn't have ramp accessibility. Because even just with having 3 steps in front of my house, I have had trouble getting my daughter into the car if she has a medical emergency. So if I ever were to buy another house, I would absolutely have a garden tub so she could play, because she can't play outside. So the garden tub. So there are certain factors important. Factors that I'd like to have, I would really like to have, a space for a computer room, but that is not a factor that I have to have. I can put the computers in the living room. Do you know what I mean? So what's important, what's not important? You have to decide that in step 3. Then you look at your alternatives. Even though you have a goal of getting a car, maybe getting a new car is what you're looking at. Well, what are the alternatives to that? What else could you do? Like for me, getting a new house. Well, instead of getting a new house, what are the alternatives to that? So you're kind of looking at, well, what are my other choices here? Even though this is my goal, this is what I want to do, are there alternatives? And then you evaluate that. You look at it and you say, okay, well, here's my goal. Here's what I want to do. Here's my important factors. Here's all my alternatives. Then you pick that best alternative. You pick the thing that fits the best. So if you go looking at those alternatives and it's like, you know what, instead of buying a new house, which is a whole lot of, I lose my value of this house, all of that, we could do some fixing up of this house. Like that's an alternative. And when I was going through that, it turned out that that was actually a better option than buying a new house. So that I picked the best alternative, and then I was able to make a rational decision. So it wasn't just me going, that's it, we have stairs and the house needs to be painted and there's so many issues with this house and I'm not house fixy handy, so I'm just going to buy a new house and sell this one as is. Not really the best decision, not a rational decision. It was I can't handle it decision. So instead I need to pull back from that, look at the alternatives, and then make a rational decision. All right, next is making intuitive decisions. The intuitive decision-making model. This model refers to arriving at decisions without conscious reasoning. The intuitive decision model argues in a given situation, experts making decisions scan the environment for cues and then recognize patterns. Once a viable course of action is identified, the decision maker puts the solution into motion. So this is not a long-term decision-making process. This is the everyday decisions that you make, like boom, boom, and you're driving down the road and you're listening to the radio and they say, I-85 is going to have a great deal of traffic. There's an accident at Peachtree Industrial, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, whoa, what's going on here? You know what? I'm going to go through DeKalb County, talking about Atlanta, but I'm going to go through DeKalb County and kind of skip all this and hit 41 and cross over, because it sounds to me like there's a whole lot going on 385, and I don't want to get stuck in traffic. Okay, so that's kind of, you identify, find a viable course of action, and you take that course of action. Now, to make intuitive decisions, you have to have lots of facts. Okay, you have to have lots of information. People who have great skill at their jobs have great intuitive decision making. So it's not just, so going beyond just learning what you're, quote, supposed to know. So for counseling, for example, which, I know this isn't your field, people usually taking this class, it's not usually their field, but if you look into counseling, somebody who has really dug into their subject, done some extra learning, if they get a client and they kind of have an intuitive decision about what could help the client, they can move forward with that because they have the education to back them. They know this process works. They've read about it. They've studied it. Same as if, you're in a managerial position and, you're working with individuals, and it's kind of like, I know my floor really well. So, for example, a manager of a restaurant, for example, if they've worked the floor, if they have been a server, if they've been a bartender, if they've been a bar back, if they've washed dishes, then they're going to make better intuitive decisions when somebody comes up to them and says, hey, dishwasher machine's not working. Well, instead of just saying, okay, well, we're just going to have to pile it up for the evening and go from there. they know how the structure works, and they're able to say, ooh, yeah, that's not going to work for us, because after rush hits at 7, we're not going to have any more plates left to be able to serve people. So we're going to need to either A, get someone in here immediately to fix it, or B, we're going to have to go to go boxes for certain items. So they're able to make an intuitive decision because they're more educated on what is necessary. All right, so let's look at making creative decisions. Now, creative decisions, think about it, well, why do you need to be creative in business? That is one of the biggest places to be creative, because sometimes things don't work out and you have to find creative solutions to problems. So 3 keys to being creative is having fluency. This refers to how different ideas are from one another. So being able to move from one idea to the next, being able to have an understanding of how these ideas fit together. Also be flexible. Flexibility refers to the unique, to how unique a person's ideas are. So if somebody has an idea that's way, way out there, you know what? It's a very creative decision. It's something that is, unique. It's different. But, if you have that flexibility to kind of look at it and say, okay, let's at least give it an opportunity and see, not maybe implement it, but let's go through the stages of how you think it would flow if it was implemented. And you could have many ideas can be generated from that. Also, originality. This refers to how unique a person's ideas are. Now, one of the big deals is with all 3 of these is you have to be willing to take the ideas. If you have somebody who you say, you know what I think would work really well for, and they go, we already have a plan. We know what we're doing. And I have been in meetings like that. I have said, I was thinking that maybe we could XYZ. Well, we already have ABC in place. And so nope. And it was like, okay, whatever. That's cool. I'll toe the line. No worries. I'll do it how you say. And then it kind of came back around like 3 months later. It was like, well, we've been reconsidering and we're thinking maybe to do it this way. And I was like, pretty much saw that coming. So, and I mean, it didn't bother me, but this particular group of individuals, they don't have any fluency, no flexibility, and very little originality. They try to kind of yank everybody else's work. And you see that a lot with people that aren't invested in others' ideas. So being open to other ideas and to say to somebody, wow, that's a really unique idea. We're going to need to do a lot of tweaking and changing with it. How about you work with so-and-so and see how that would play out, and then come back to me when you guys have kind of a formulation of how this would look. So, and kind of thinking forward, not just looking at the moment. So that helps with creativity for sure. So, how do you enhance creativity in groups? Well, first of all, your team composition. You want to diversify your team. You want to change up group membership, and you want sometimes for there to be leaderless teams. Leaderless teams are great. I mean, I know that sounds like what? But leaderless teams, you maybe send a group of 5 over and you say, okay, I want you 5 to work together. You may have the leader who is not present in that you report back to them, but in that particular group, you don't have a person who's kind of right there saying, no, this is how we're doing it. This is how it is. You just feel more open to communicate. Changing group membership. This is a really great thing to do. This is something that often organizations don't do. They have the same people doing the same thing. And honestly, in a lot of corporations that I've seen, that I've studied, that I have, observed, there's no group membership change. It's the same 4 or 5 people doing the work, and the same 4 or 5 people doing nothing, watching the 4 or 5 people do the work. And that gets really old. So having an actual change in group membership is helpful because it kind of gives a new insight. You don't have that same push for my agenda from that same small group of people anymore. You now have a whole nother group that's like, listen, I'm not pushing my agenda. I'm pushing the company's agenda, or I'm pushing the student's agenda in my case. So having that group membership changeover is often very important. Like for tech, for example, we change over the faculty president. It changes every 2 years. And partly because that way, it gets in kind of new ideas, new thought processes. Culture. Institute organizational memory, meaning that you kind of create a culture of the institution and what you stand for organizationally, like what you guys stand for. That would be like text mission statements. Building a physical space to conduct creativity, giving people a place where they can get together and brainstorm. This is incredibly important. And a lot of companies just don't have it. I mean, I'll be honest, we have our offices, but we don't have a common place where, 6 of us can get together. We can always get a classroom. So, I mean, for us, it's kind of cool. But, in a company where you need to have that separate place or space where people can actually get together. Incorporate creative behavior. Ask people to give ideas. Create a culture of it. Ask people for new things that they think will solve or resolve problems. So even if, somebody turns in something that is completely undoable, the thing is, sometimes you can look at that and go, yeah, but here's a little piece of that we probably can use. Team processes. Engage in brainstorming. Brainstorming is simply the best thing I can tell you about brainstorming is when you think of like shows like CSI, a lot of the criminology shows, you see like 6 people sitting around and they're just kind of shooting ideas off of each other. No idea is better than any one idea. And if you also notice, somebody may shoot an idea out there and somebody goes, yeah, no, but because they go, well, no, but this, yada, yada, yada. And then someone else says, okay, yada, yada, yada. And then someone else goes, well, maybe it could be humma, humma, humma. And then somebody else comes up and goes, oh, yada, yada, yada. And then suddenly they go, oh, okay, here we're moving forward. And nobody's feelings were hurt. When somebody comes back with, not really, because this is why. They listen to that person, but they always had kind of a why behind it. So brainstorming with other individuals is really good. Sometimes you get into groups and someone will say, I was reading a really great article about such and such. And they go, well, that doesn't really apply here. Let's move forward. And I mean, I've experienced that actually. I've brought something up in a group and I said, a lot of research supports XYZ. And it's like, well, that's not what we do here. And it's kind of like, okay, well, let's move on. And the idea wasn't even entertained. And so I was like, okay. But brainstorming is giving everyone kind of the opportunity to speak and just kind of bounce off of each other. And also use, nominal group technique, use the nominal group technique. So the nominal group technique, and I have a little thing pulled up for this, so let me pull that up. The nominal group technique is a process involved in problem solving, identification, solution generalization, and decision making. It can be used of groups of many sizes who want to make their decisions quickly by a vote, but want everyone's opinion taken into account, okay? The method is kind of a tallying of the differences. The first thing you do is every group member gives their view of the solution with a short explanation. Then they duplicate the solutions are, the duplicate solutions are eliminated from the pile, eliminated from the list, and the list of all the solutions, and the members proceed to rank those solutions 1 to 4 and so on, depending upon how many stay. You want to encourage the sharing and discussions of reasons for the choices made by each group member, thereby identifying kind of the common ground. And that way you can kind of get, this diversity often allows the creation of kind of hybrid of ideas, combining of more than one, that's my daughter, but combining of more than one idea, often found to be better than those ideas that were initially considered. So this is really kind of awesome. The basic method, you tally, you rank everything, and then depending upon the rankings, you see which top 2 maybe were the most significant, and then you dwindle it down to those top 2, and then you can choose to later, and we'll talk about this later, but you can choose to do a consensus type of thing once you get it down. It's very hard to do any kind of consensus work or any kind of agreeing on decision making if you've got 60 decision choices to make. So also, next, leadership. Leadership should always challenge teams. They should give teams achievable goals, decide and how they can achieve those goals. Let them decide. And then a lot of celebrating the creativity, support and celebrating, and then being a role model as well. With me, for example, I hear a lot of kudos for a lot of people, kudos for this, kudos for that. I don't necessarily get them from my supervisor, and I don't really know why. But I do get them from other people, so I feel pretty good about that. But that's not really a big deal. If you know you're doing a good job, if your leadership is not celebrating your creativity or showing support at all, really just continue moving forward if others are. And then maybe approach the leadership to say, hey, listen, just wondering if I'm doing, how you feel about how I'm doing. Am I doing a good job? Am I exceeding expectations? Because it could just be that, it's being overlooked or it's not being noticed. So with leadership, you've got to try to make sure that you keep an eye out on what everyone is doing and you give those kudos where the kudos are deserved and you say good job to people who are doing a good job. It's very, very important for leadership to encourage and be a role model for those people, all of the people who are in their group, regardless of how they feel about them. If you are working with a crew of 8 people, there's going to be somebody who you do not favor, who you do not maybe care for very much. But you gotta make sure you get over that when you get to work. You gotta put that behind you in decision making, and you have to look at kind of what they're doing. And sometimes the more support and the more you are a role model that you're good to this person, or you say things like, hey, listen, it's great to have you here today. Other people who maybe don't particularly care about that personality or that person will see, oh, well, you know what? I can take, my boss likes him, so yeah, I guess I can tolerate him for a minute. Do you know what I mean? So that way you can be a good role model for others. All right, so decision traps. Some of the decision traps, you have things like overconfidence bias, hindsight bias, anchoring, framing, and escalation of commitment. So overconfidence bias. This occurs when individuals overestimate their ability to predict the future. So it's kind of like, oh, I know this is what's going to happen, so ergo, I'm going to make this decision. All right, so I had a friend of mine. She absolutely went ahead and planned her event for June the 8th. She paid her deposit, which they told her was non-refundable. Oh, today's June 8th. It wasn't June 8th. I'm sorry. It was May 8th. May 8th. They said it was non-refundable, her deposit, and they asked her if she was sure she wanted to move forward. She was like, oh yeah, it's going to be fine. This is just a blow up. And she was absolutely convinced that she would be able to have her event. Well, guess what? She could not have her event. They allowed her to have her event, but she could only have 10 people instead of, the 100 people that she had planned. And so she created actually a virtual event. It went really well. But the business, when she asked for her money back, she was so mad, and I was like, you can't be mad at them. They actually made you sign an extra contract that says, I understand that COVID-19 may prevent me from having my event, which I am scheduling during a pandemic. So she made a bad decision because she was overconfident. Hindsight bias is kind of the opposite of that overconfidence. And now we do this all the time. Everyone does this. It's when we look back in time at mistakes that seem obvious after they have already occurred. So, for example, hindsight bias, it starts raining, you go up. I knew it would rain today. Did you really know it would rain today? Did you absolutely know it would rain today? Hindsight bias, you make a mistake and then you look back and you go, they should have figured that out because the signs were all there. That happens, a good bit. In really every aspect of life. I mean, I could probably think of an example from pretty much every aspect of life where my husband, for example, I'm in the middle of playing a game and I'm like, I'm going to go, get this elite character. Oh, well, you can't take that on your own. And I'm like, yeah, I totally can. Oh, no, you can't. And I'm like, yeah, I totally can. And then I do it. He ignores it. And then later I do it again and he goes, see, I told you. And it's like, no, that's hindsight bias because there's 10 times I was fine, but then this time I died and you're like, see, I knew you would. No, it's because you were incorrect all the other times. So hindsight bias can get in the way because we can think, well, I would have done it differently because I would have known that was going on. Not necessarily. So, all right. Next is anchoring. Anchoring refers to the tendency for individuals to rely too heavily on a single piece of information. So, for example, if I told you that the Mississippi River was about 50 miles long. Okay, now I'm going to ask you, guess, it's about 50 miles long, so I want you to guess how long it is. You would go anywhere between, 40 and maybe 100 in your guessing. But if I told you the Mississippi River was 500 miles long, okay, you're going to go more looking at like 200 to maybe 700. If I told you the Mississippi was 1,000 miles long, if that's where I anchored you at 1,000 miles long, you would be more likely to say 1,500 or, 900 to 1,500 or maybe even 900 to 2,000. And the Mississippi River, I believe, is 2,200 miles long. I have to see that. Now let's look at that. Mississippi River length. Let's see. I think it's up 2348. So it's actually 2348. Okay, so those of you who want to know, it's 2,348 miles long. Okay, so that's an anchoring. Car dealerships do it all the time. They anchor you and they say, oh, well, this car is $38,000. All right, that's their anchor. That's where they want to put you. So when you get it for 36, you're all like, yeah, I saved $2,000. Well, here's the dealio. You could probably get it for like 31. Easy 31. And maybe even 29 if you got a good haggle and it's towards the end of the month. All right. So don't let them ground you in this anchor right here. So it refers to the tendency for individuals to rely too heavily on a single piece of information. So be careful with that anchor. So when somebody gives you an anchor, be careful with that. Next is framing bias. This refers to the tendency of decision makers to be influenced by the way a situation or problem is presented to them. Okay? So how the problem is presented to you. If I say my daughter bumped another car. My daughter bumped another car. Okay? Versus my daughter smashed. Okay? This is an accident she had. There's a big difference there. I'm framing it for you. I am framing that bias. If I say to you, oh my gosh, it was incredibly hectic at the store. And you walk in and there's like 25 people and it's not crowded at all and nothing's really going on. You're like, wow, hectic was a strong word to use. Do you know what I mean? Like, was it really that hectic? So how people frame things really does influence how you think or what you believe about what they're trying to make you decide on, what you're deciding on. All right, escalation of commitment. This occurs when individuals continue on a failing course of action after information reveals that it's a poor path to follow. It's like, well, I've already done it this long. I've already done this much. I might as well keep going. I might as well keep doing it. And it's like, no, sometimes things just need to be scrapped. Like sometimes things are just bad and they didn't work out and you do not need to continue moving forward. You just need to tank it because it's not going to work out. And that's really hard to do. I mean, when you're looking at, like, for example, software, I got this new piece of software. I paid $200 for it. I was totally going to use it for my classes. It was amazing. It was great. And I kept trying to make a commitment to this. I kept trying to make it work, but it wouldn't record properly. And I was like, I just have to learn how to make it work. And if I can learn how to make it record, we'll be fine. And I kept having trouble. And that's why, my recordings weren't working. And finally I was like, you know what? $200 loss, but I'm going to have to scrap it. I can't use it. Like, it's not working for my classes. It works great for for other venues and other things, but it does not work for students to be engaged with me. Zoom works so much better. So I actually wrote the company and told them, listen, I wanted to use this for education. I paid $200 for it. It's not working. Can I have my money back? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for giving us a try. And so they gave me my money back. So I bought a Zoom account instead. And Zoom is working marvelously. I'm really enjoying Zoom. All right. So how do we then, if we're in groups, what happens with groupthink? Groupthink can be very dangerous, okay? Groupthink is something that we all kind of get wrapped up in depending upon the groups that we're in. Groupthink is the practice of thinking or making decisions as a group in a way that discourages creativity or individual responsibility. So the dangers of groupthink are you have illusions of invulnerability, meaning that, well, we can't, we can't get hurt because it's being made in a group. You have a collection of rationalizations, everyone going, yeah, it'll be fine. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Backing each other up, even if it's a bad idea. Groups' beliefs are unquestioned. People don't challenge those beliefs. I have been in many groups where I agree with what's going on. I think it's fine what they're doing, but because no other view is being put out there, I will throw a view out there. Even if I'm looked at as like, well, that was dumb, or that doesn't make sense, or yeah, Meredith, not really what we're looking for. Oh, okay. I just thought I'd throw it out there. I do that all the time. Probably why I'm not invited on too many groups, but I do that all the time because you do need to throw something out there. Stereotype views of the groups. If the group does not kind of pull themselves out and say, well, what are our views, and are our views getting in the way of making decisions for the mass? Like if you get 10 doctors in a room together to make a decision on something, you got to throw some nurses and some interns and some a couple patients. You need to throw a big group in there. We have, like for a tech, for example, we have some groups that don't have any faculty members on it at all. Faculty members absolutely need to be involved in those groups. I'm talking like faculty members. I'm talking like no other nothing, like not like chairs and divisions and whatever's, just plain old regular, bottom of the totem pole faculty member. Same with staff. You have decisions that are being made on higher levels about classrooms and things, how things are going to be done. And you need some staff involved, in the administration to say, hey, well, this is how it's going on the floor. So there needs to be that open communication, because a group of just 10 doctors, they're going to have groupthink. They're not going to come up with the best solutions for a practice or for a hospital. All right, direct pressure. Often there's a lot of direct pressure when you have group decisions to make. There's a hard push for things to be the way that the person that is running the group wants it to be. And if you have a group of 10, for example, being run by somebody, and you have 3 people who are like, we'll back them no matter what they say, that's 3 cheerleaders that they have right away. So those 3 cheerleaders are going to push the other 6 to go, well, I don't want to argue. I've been in so many groups where people just won't even speak. Like they won't say a word the entire time they're there. And then have other groups where it's like, I'm going to get my word in. In fact, it's gotten to the point now where they're going to get their word in so much that people just kind of, now turn to them. And I always speak when I'm in groups. I try not to. Sometimes I'm like, I'm not going to speak, but I want other people's words to get out there. So I've even had people slide me notes in groups that say, could you ask about this? And I'm like, yeah, I'll ask about it, because I am not afraid to speak up in a group. And I've been chewed out a few times, not chewed out, but I have been reprimanded, about my, or not reprimanded even, I wouldn't even say it that way. I have been asked to stand down with an idea, that wasn't even mine. But the person that was expressing it was important to them. So I thought I'd put it out there. It was an important decision. It was an important aspect that they had. So they kind of wanted their voice to be heard. And then actually what ended up happening was they kind of started talking after I did. And they said, well, I don't completely disagree with Meredith. And I was like, all right, cool. They're going to back me on their comment. But anyways, self-censorship is also something that, that people will do when they're in a group. They'll censor what they have to say because they're worried about the group collective. You have also the illusion of anonymity. People are more likely to make risky decisions when it's big groups. If I tell you I have $100,000 to spend on the care of my child, Should I spend it on creating an outdoor playground for her? Or should I spend it on partially fixing up the house and making a smaller indoor extension play area for her? If you're in a group, you may vote, oh, make the big playground because it'll be great. Make that big playground investment. It'll be spectacular. But if I asked you personally, you're going to be more careful with that money because you're going to feel more accountable. So in groupthink, you lose accountability. Right with the mouse, yo. But you lose that accountability when you're in groupthink. Next is also the emergence of self-appointed mind guards. When you have groupthink, a self-appointed mind guard, these are individuals that are in the group that are really there to keep important information that may contradict what the leader believes from the group, or may contradict cohesiveness. So let's say somebody comes up with a piece of evidence that the new part for the car, such and such, is not properly functioning, but they've already made 20,000 of them. Well, that person may want to hide that from the group because it goes against the group believing that everything is fine. So self-appointed mind guards are dangerous to have, simply because they try to guard or keep out things that are contrary to the group. So you may have a group that's very gung-ho, anti-something. Well, then you have all of this contraindication saying, well, no, research does not support what you guys think. Like, research just flat does not support what this group thinks. But then the group is like, well, these mind guards will hide that information from the leader or find ways to discredit using, their group's beliefs, unique beliefs, and their stereotypes to kind of combat against any new ideas or emerging research or technology. So how do we avoid groupthink? So individuals should, and group leaders should. Okay, so how to avoid groupthink is, first of all, when you have groupthink, groups can make amazing decisions if you avoid these pitfalls here. If you intentionally say, okay, first of all, let's look at all of our ideas and let's look outside of our group and pull some things in. So before absolutely anything is done, the group needs to make a decision that they are going to be open. Okay, so the group should discuss symptoms of groupthink and how they can avoid them. So they should be open to that. You should always assign somebody to kind of challenge the group. Like, it's their job to challenge. Like, they're not going to get in trouble if they come up with an alternative idea because they are there to come up with those alternative ideas. Even if they agree, they can kind of get in there. Also, debate ethical implications. What are the ethical implications? And encourage culture of difference where different ideas are valued. So kind of encourage that culture. All right, so individuals should monitor personal behavior for signs of groupthink. They should check self-censorship, make sure they're speaking up when they feel they need to speak up. Avoid pressure from other group members, and remind members of the ground rules for avoiding groupthink if they get off track. Group leaders should also group leaders then, they should break into groups or subgroups so that way they can kind of have different people talking with each other. Remain impartial and refrain from stating preferences at the onset of decisions. And then set a tone, kind of encouraging evaluations throughout deliberations. And then create anonymous feedback channel through which all group members can contribute if they desire to. So being able to let all group members kind of be involved. All right. The last thing we're going to talk about is making better decisions. Well, the nominal group technique, which we talked about earlier, I kind of gave you a little bit about it, is one way to do this. And that's by, the 4 steps where you have people write their ideas, you discuss all of the ideas, you get rid of the ones that, the double ones. Then you have people discuss their ideas. Then you have people kind of take an evaluation of those ideas, and then you come to a decision on the idea. And then the Delphi technique, these are questionnaires that are kind of given out that you can have, you set one stage of questionnaires that refine the next stage of questionnaires to refine the next stage of questionnaires to finally you kind of come up with what you were looking for. A consensus is when you make agreement on all decisions. This one can be extremely hard. Like I said earlier, using the nominal group technique, the NGT, this can help you come up with a consensus. But it's very hard. And this is not voting. This is not a vote. Okay. Okay. This is a vote. Majority rule is a vote. So think about it. If you're going to implement a potential company change and you've got 100 people that work for your company and you say, let's take a vote. 49 vote for A, 51 vote for B. Okay, that's a problem. Even though 51, so that's the majority, so they win. But the dilemma is they only won by one, and there are going to be a high percentage of people in the 49 group that are going to be very unhappy. There's issues, there's problems, blah, blah, blah. It's voting for having people that have to work together later does not work with everything. It does work with some things. Like if you're trying to vote if you should put a microwave or a toaster oven into the faculty lounge, okay, that's going to be fine. People will deal with that. They're not going to spend the rest of their career going, oh, I can't believe we didn't get a microwave, raw. So that's going to be fine. But with larger decisions, you need to look at that consensus, trying to find a consensus, an agreed upon decision. Group Decision Support System, GDSS. This is an interactive computer-based software. It is very expensive. How this software works is you put in every single possible decision or outcome into the computer. Then it interacts with all of those decisions or potential outcomes to come up with kind of the best decision. This kind of really is sort of a nominal group technique. Utilizing the computer. It's extremely expensive, and sometimes it can leave out the human factor. It doesn't take into account humanity, so that can be a problem. Now, next is decision tree. Decision trees are really great when it comes to making decisions because it's an easy technique to use if you're making a solo decision that has to be made. You can also use decision trees to map out if you're using the nominal group technique, which is excellent. You maybe if you have 3 decisions that are being made, you can use a tree for each, 3 ideas. You can use a tree for each idea and see which one has the best outcome. But let's say you're making one decision of, am I going to extend my office? Am I going to build or am I going to expand? So am I going to build a whole new building or am I just going to expand the building that is here? Well, if I build a whole new building, high demand, low demand, the high probability at 60%, we will have a $650,000 impact. We're going to make money. Okay. $650,000. 40% probability, low probability is that we're going to have 33,000. So that puts us, we're making 100,000 here, and here we're making 3, 4, 5, 6, 420,000 extra in revenue. To just expand, it's going to cost us 95,000 to expand. It's going to be a 70% chance that we'll make 510, whereas low demand will make 100. So it's like which will be better. And then also you can continue branching this out. This can be like a 2-year prediction, and then you can create like a 5-year prediction. You can kind of map it out further there. All right, so summary. Decision making is a critical component to business, obviously. It's a critical component to business. Some decisions are obvious and can be made quickly without investing much time or effort in decision making. However, others require substantial consideration in the circumstances surrounding the decision, available alternatives, and potential outcomes. There are several There are several methods that can be used to make decisions. We looked at some of those. Group decision making can also have multiple models depending on the situation. We looked at some of those as well. And even when specific models are followed, groups and individuals can often fall into potential decision making pitfalls. So you have to be careful with that as well. So on the other hand, if too much information is presented, people can suffer from analysis paralysis, meaning that I don't know, like choosing the toilet paper. There's just too many choices. Well, not now. not during some days, but it used to be. There's so many choices of different kinds of Kleenex tissues to buy. Do I buy stuff with this? I can't make a decision. So you don't necessarily want too many choices, but you do want choices, however, that reflect a diverse considerations. So, all right. Thank you guys so much. And I will have this posted up for you to watch if you would so desire, and have an absolutely wonderful day.